The coffee had barely started to drip when the door swung open, no knock, no hesitation. I didn't bother to turn. Only one person still came through my threshold like that, Marcus. "Morning," I called, reaching for the jar of grounds. He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, quiet, watching. As I began to stir sugar into my mug, his voice appeared at my shoulder, flat and sure. "My wife, the kids, and her mother are moving in. We already decided. You'll be alone." The spoon stopped. My hand hung in the air between calm and collapse. I didn't look back. He kept talking as if he were rearranging furniture in someone else's house. "There's no reason for you to be here alone, Mom. You've got 3 bedrooms. Ours barely fits 2. The kids can take your sewing room. Otilia can have the guest room." I let the silence spread across the kitchen and lean against the cabinets. I wanted him to feel it. Marcus took that silence for consent. He strolled through the living room, pointing at corners, assigning rooms like a foreman. My grip on the mug tightened with every step he took across my floors. It hit me then that he hadn't come to ask, he'd come to declare. I offered the kind of small nod you give someone who's forgotten how often you've said yes before. When he left, keys jangling like a small ceremony, I poured the rest of the coffee down the sink. Standing at the basin, rinsing the bitter ring from the cup, the sound of running water pulled me back 2 years. That afternoon, Martina had called, sobbing. Her mother, Otilia, had collapsed. A mass pressing on organs, no insurance, no savings. I remember going to my bedroom closet without crying or hesitating, and pulling out a little blue box I'd tucked away after Michael dyed the wedding ring he'd given me when we believed love would carry us through anything. The next morning I walked into the jeweler's and sold it quietly. No announcements. The money covered most of Otilia's surgery. I used savings for the rest. Marcus thanked me perfunctorily. Martina cried. Otilia never called. I never spoke about what I'd given up, not only money, but a surrender so deep it hurt. That ring had been the last thing Michael left me before cancer, the bills, before I became everyone else's problem solver. This house was the one thing I'd built with my own hands, paid off over 27 years, maintained while raising Marcus and his sister alone, day shifts, night shifts, all of it to keep a roof over our heads. And now they spoke of it like it was square footage on a brochure. The guest room they wanted for Otilia I'd saved for that furniture for 6 months. The sewing room, my quiet corner, the only place that still smelled like peace, they wanted to turn into a playroom. They didn't ask because they assumed they didn't need to. I'd always said yes. I always stretched thinner for their comfort. As I wiped the counter that morning, a slow ache spread through me, something tearing quietly and deep. This time I didn't think it would stitch back. Marcus came back the next morning as if the previous day's announcement needed repeating. He slouched in the kitchen chair, arranging the house in his head. "The kids will take the sewing room," he said. "Great light for schoolwork. Alia will be in the guest room closer to the hall." His voice made assumptions about Otilia I'd never been permitted to learn. When he added lightly, "You and Martina can sleep on the pull-out in the living room for now," those 2 words, "for now," rolled into forever. I nodded. I'd learned a long time ago that saying nothing sounded like agreement, but that afternoon I reached for the landline. I made 3 quiet calls. To Ivet at the county clerk's office, to a lawyer I'd met years before, and to someone I hadn't spoken to in over a decade who owed me a favor. I didn't panic. I didn't raise my voice. Something inside me had shifted into motion. The next day, Martina arrived with a paper bag of sweet rolls and a smile so practiced it shined like laminate. She walked in as though she already lived there, complimenting my curtains and strolling toward the guest room without waiting for permission. "The kids are so excited," she chirped. "They've already packed their boxes. Leandro even picked out which corner of your sewing room he wants." I nodded once. Only once. She laughed lightly. "Hope it's okay we told them it was official." I smiled back, because it was official, just not the way she imagined. That afternoon Alda arrived, carrying 2 black coffees and the fierce look she only used when someone was trying to take advantage of her. She didn't even sit down before asking, "What exactly did they say to you?" So I told her. Everything. Every assumption. Every room they reassigned. Every smug detail of the plan Marcus had laid out, like he was measuring a storage unit. Martina's sweet rolls, her hope it's okay, the lie they told the kids. Alda listened with her lips pressed tight, nodding in the right places but not interrupting. When I finished, she sat back and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for me. "This isn't about family," she said. "This is about control. I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't. I remembered when Marcus said he'd stay at Seelan's house for just a week after her divorce." Alda raised an eyebrow. 2 years, she reminded me. He lived there 2 years and didn't pay a cent, because he knew he didn't have to. The truth stung more than any insult could. Marcus hadn't offered rent, hadn't asked if I wanted to give up my sewing room, hadn't even waited for my answer. He just assumed, because I had always folded before. Alda reached across the table, rested her hand on mine, and said softly, "You've always given, Karen, but giving isn't the same as being taken." I breathed in slowly. "I know. I just didn't want to admit it. Not with my own son." "Well," she said, squeezing my fingers. "It's time." I opened the drawer beneath the phone and pulled out the envelope I had started weeks earlier, long before Marcus said a word about moving in. It held a deed copy, a will, an emergency plan I hadn't yet finalized. I set it on the table. Alda nodded, eyes steady. "Then let's make it official." That night she helped me pack paperwork, seal files, and write instructions. We weren't finished, not yet, but the line had finally been drawn. And once I drew it, I knew I wasn't stepping back. On Monday morning, I put on a plain coat, tucked a manila folder under my arm, and went to the bank. No fanfare, no hesitation. The teller greeted me by name. "Just the usual deposit, Miss Karen?" "Not today," I said quietly. "I'd like to make a transfer." She glanced at the amount and raised her brows. "Are you sure?" I smiled. Very. It wasn't millions, but it was mine. Money I saved in silence from sewing hems, patching jeans, taking little weekend jobs, money no one knew about, especially not Marcus. By noon, the funds were secured in a new account, under my name only. By 2 p.m., I was sitting across from a realtor near the old courthouse. "We've got a listing in Redfern Hills," she said. "One story, quiet, lovely light in the back room, great for sewing." I didn't hesitate. I signed. The papers moved fast, almost too fast. Nobody asked why I was selling, and I didn't offer explanations. I left the office lighter than I'd felt in months. That evening, Marcus texted, asking if they could come by Saturday to move their things in. I replied, "Let's talk first." I didn't owe him the conversation, but I wanted him to look at me, really look, when the door he thought was guaranteed quietly disappeared behind a lock he'd never even noticed. I hit send, brewed a fresh cup of coffee, and sat down to wait. The moving truck arrived at 7 a.m., sharp on Saturday. From my porch, I watched Marcus climb out, clipboard in hand, looking like a man directing a film set rather than moving into someone else's home. Martina followed with her usual flurry of instructions, while the kids spilled out barefoot and buzzing with excitement. Boxes labeled toys, kitchen, and bedding were stacked in the driveway. A welcome mat. Houseplants. Folding chairs. They had brought their entire lives and none of their humility. They didn't knock. They didn't pause. They simply marched toward the door, expecting it to swing open. It didn't. I stepped forward, arms crossed, standing on the old iron doormat I'd kept since the first winter after Kenneth died. "Nothing's coming in," I said. Marcus let out a confused laugh. "Mom, stop. Just open up. We need to start unloading." I shook my head. "This house is sold." Everything froze, the kids, the movers, even Martina's face, which drained of color. "Sold?" she whispered. "To a quiet woman from Charleston," I said. "She likes gardening and has no plans to turn the sewing room into a playroom." Marcus dropped his clipboard. "You can't be serious. As serious as the deed and signature. You didn't even tell us. You didn't ask." The movers exchanged uncomfortable glances until one finally stepped forward. "Ma'am, do you still want us to clear space for delivery?" "You won't be unloading anything here," I said gently. Marcus stormed up the steps, rage tightening his face. We gave notice to our landlord. The kids have been planning. You blindsided us. You made plans based on a house that wasn't yours, I replied calmly. Martina's voice cracked. But we told the kids. Then next time, I interrupted, plan with the owner. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity, the kind you only find after decades of being talked over. Behind them, the movers slowly began reloading the boxes they'd just carried out. The kids watched in stunned silence, clutching their belongings: a teddy bear, a half-deflated ball, a blanket. You're throwing your own family out, Marcus hissed. I looked him straight in the eye. I'm keeping them out. When the truck pulled away, every box still sealed, I felt the strangest thing. Not guilt, not sadness, but steadiness. Marcus came back Monday afternoon. Of course he did. Uninvited, furious, and not alone. Uncle Ned trailed behind him, holding his cap in both hands like he hoped it could shield him from whatever storm was coming. Marcus barged in without knocking again. This has gone far enough, he barked. I brought someone neutral, someone who remembers when you were reasonable. Ned gave me a small, soft smile. Karen, honey, maybe we can talk a bit? I didn't argue, but I didn't move aside either. I led them to the dining room. 3 mugs of coffee were set out. Mine was hot. Theirs sat at the table, already cooling, deliberate. Marcus began before the chair even stopped moving. We were counting on that house. The kids are confused. Martina's been crying for days. I said nothing. Ned tried next, gently. No one's saying you didn't work hard for it. But family's family. Maybe letting them stay a few months would have made things easier. Still, I said nothing. Marcus softened his tone. A tactic, not remorse. You've always been the strong one, the rock. We just thought you'd understand. I slid a folder across the table. Neither reached for it at first. When Marcus finally opened it, I watched the emotions pass over his face. Smug confusion, realization, fury. Deed. Sale agreement. Bank transfer. New property title. All finalized. All legitimate. All mine. You planned this behind our backs, he choked out. No, I said evenly. I planned it quietly, because every time I speak up, someone tries to talk me out of my own life. Ned let out a low whistle and leaned back like the air had thinned. You really went through with it? Yes, I said. And the house. The memories, they were never yours to take. Marcus shot up so fast the chair scraped the floor. You think this makes you strong? You just cut off your own family. No, I replied softly. I finally stopped pretending. He stood there, red-faced and shaking, then stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frames. The moment the echo faded, I reached for my mug and called Alda. It was time to pack for the next chapter. I signed the final set of papers with a steady, unshaking hand. The pen glided across the lines like it had been waiting years to move that way. The notary smiled warmly. Congratulations, she said, sliding everything into a thick manila envelope. The house was no longer mine, and for the first time, that felt like relief, not loss. Danielle, the realtor, with kind eyes and a firm handshake, handed me a single silver key. Welcome home, Karen, she said. West Eugene is quieter than you'd expect. I think you'll love it. I closed my hand around the key like it might vanish if I blinked. 2 bedrooms. A bright kitchen. A patch of earth in the back waiting for flowers. No ghosts. No assumptions. No footsteps, stomping through as if the space was owed to them. Danielle offered to walk me out to my car, but I shook my head. I needed to walk through the old house alone one last time, not to say goodbye, but to take back the quiet moments it had cost me. The cinnamon scent from last December still lingered faintly in the hallway. The laundry room's squeaky floorboard complained beneath my heel, the one I'd never gotten around to fixing. My sewing room stood stripped bare, but the walls still echoed the rhythm of my machine. I didn't say goodbye to the house. I didn't owe walls a farewell. I owed myself a beginning. I set the key under the mat, as instructed, locked the door, and didn't look back. The bungalow sat beneath a maple tree, with leaves already turning, even though autumn hadn't quite arrived. A slightly crooked bird bath leaned in the yard, the walkway cracked but clean. Inside, the air felt light, untouched, unclaimed. I walked through each room, absorbing the quiet, my quiet. In the bedroom, my bedroom, I exhaled fully for the first time in weeks. No one had ever stood in this space calling me selfish. No one had ever barged in, demanding I rearrange my life around theirs. This place didn't just belong to me, it recognized me. I set my bag on the counter, brewed fresh coffee, and stepped barefoot onto the small patch of yard out back. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd plant lilies. Today, I would rest. The phone rang the following morning while I was rinsing out my mug. An unfamiliar number, but something in me already knew. "Miss Karen Lell?" a polished voice asked. "Yes," I replied. "My name is Jared Teague. I represent Mr. Marcus Lell. He has filed a petition contesting the recent sale of the property on Ferndale Avenue. He alleges that the transaction was conducted under mental duress. That you may have been coerced or—" I didn't let him finish. My laugh burst out, a real one. Sharp, honest, chest, deep. When I could breathe again, I asked, "And what evidence does your client have for that story?" "There are family concerns," he said carefully. "He believes you weren't operating with full mental—" "Mr. Teague," I cut in, "please tell your client the only thing I wasn't operating with was tolerance for being used." A quiet pause. I walked to the filing cabinet, pulled out exactly what I needed, and set it on the table. My most recent medical report, clean bill of health, signed 2 months ago. Power of attorney documents. A notarized sale agreement, flawless and final. "I'll fax over my medical clearance and legal paperwork," I said. "You'll find everything in perfect order." "Yes, ma'am," he replied, voice smaller. "We'll review it." "One more thing, Mr. Teague," I added. "I'm not angry. I'm not even surprised. But remind your client of this. I am his mother, not his asset." And then I hung up. Some truths don't need an echo. I watched the morning light slide across my garden, warming the unplanted lily bulbs. I thought of Marcus, not the boy I raised, but the man who had tried to reduce me to a line item on a wish list. Let him try guilt. Let him try courts. I had documents. I had a spine. And finally, a home that belonged only to me. The kitchen in my new home smells like dark roast and cinnamon, my new favorite pairing. Sunlight slips through the lace curtains I stitched last week, the ones I never dared hang in the old house. Too delicate, too mine. This morning, the quiet was interrupted only by the soft hum of my neighbor's voice. Janine, retired nurse, 3 grandkids, sewing enthusiast in distress, brought over her machine with the bobbin jammed and thread knotted into a bird's nest. We sat together at my table for an hour, talking about fabric choices, stubborn needles, and grandkids who don't pick up their socks. When she left, she handed me a small bundle of zippers. "Just in case you get bored," she said. I smiled. "I don't get bored anymore. My mornings belong to me now. My afternoons, too. The only footsteps in this house are ones I invite. There's no thud of toy boxes, no unspoken expectations drifting through the air. Just silence, not the aching kind, but the steady, honest kind. Silence that fills a home the way it's meant to be filled. On the windowsill sits a framed photo of my grandchildren, Leighton and Mason. They visited last weekend. Marcus hovered on the porch, unsure if he should step inside, which was appropriate, considering it wasn't his place to enter anymore. But the kids ran to me bright and squealing, and I made cinnamon toast the way I used to. They come on my terms now. They leave on my terms, too. And when they drive away, the house doesn't collapse into emptiness. It settles into a warm kind of quiet, the kind made of echoes I chose, not demands forced onto me. Later, after washing my coffee cup, I walked down the short hallway toward the bedroom. A mirror hung beside the bookshelf, simple frame, clean glass. I passed it every day, but this time I stopped. It wasn't the lines in my face that caught my eye, nor the silver streak at my temples. It was my expression. Calm, certain, unapologetic. I leaned in slightly, as if greeting an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years, and I said it out loud, letting the name settle into the room like a truth finally given breath. Karen Hollis. Not Mom. Not Grandma. Not let us stay until we get back on our feet. Not can you give up your room? Not you've got space, we decided. Just me. My name, my life, my home. And for the first time in decades, I smiled because I meant it.